The League considers our issue, that of partisanship and polarization in local and state government, a very important issue. And often it's a very difficult issue to talk about. However, we believe it's a very important conversation to have. And we thank Senator Faraci and former Representative Marron for being part of this conversation this evening. I am also a member of the Braver Angels East Central Illinois Alliance, as are others who I see attending this evening. And we thank you for being here this evening. The Braver Angels mission is simply one statement. I'd like to read it to you. Bring Americans together to bridge the partisan divide and strengthen our democratic republic. Locally, the Braver Angels Alliance has been doing this through their monthly meetings, and we have public events. For example, last February, we had a town hall, a campus community town hall, and it was attended by 200 people, and it was extremely successful. In June of last year, we had another successful event, the Constituent Conversation in Rantoul. We brought together Reds and Blues and Independents in the cafeteria at Rantoul High School, and we talked about two issues. One, divisiveness politics and how we can come together to get things done. And two, workforce development in northern Champaign County. Like this evening, Senator Faraci and Representative Marron both said yes when we asked them if they would be guest speakers at the constituent conversation. And a very interesting, side note about this is they were the first elected officials to speak at a Braver Angels event in the state of Illinois. So really, you guys were trailblazers from the mindset of a Braver Angel. So thank you so much for twice saying yes to our invitation. This evening, our format would be a conversational tone. Some questions were submitted ahead of time, and we invite you to put your questions in the chat box. When I call on you, just unmute yourself when you ask your question. And before we begin our conversation, just for reminders, this is being recorded, so please keep yourself muted unless you're asking a question. If you're eating an evening meal or you're walking around, as you're on this Zoom, might you turn off your video? The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, so we ask that our discussion this year this evening does not cast blame on either party. And we promise to end at 8 o'clock so we can watch the Illinois beat Northwestern after we get off. Okay, so I think we're ready to begin the conversation. I think that's all that I wanted to say or had to say. And I am delighted that I get to ask the first question. And it's a little bit of a personal question, but not too personal, of the two of you. Senator Faraci, you were sworn in January of 2023, and we're wondering what your reflections are after being in Springfield for 1 year. And Representative Marron, you retired last month after being 5 years in Springfield, and we are curious about your reflection after being in Springfield for 5 years. So should we start with Representative Marron, since you're unmuted?
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, this is a great group, and Braver Angels is a great group, and so honored to be here this evening. And I guess my reflection, it was certainly an honor. It was an honor to serve the 104th district, and to do my absolute best. I tried to do my best to represent that district. It's until the redistricting, it was a pretty solidly Republican district, and then it became much more of a toss-up district. But even when it was a more conservative, more Republican district, it was a very diverse district. It had rural areas, it had urban areas in the city of Danville and parts of Champaign, Urbana, and Rantoul. So that it was just it was a challenging but rewarding district to represent, because the diversity of viewpoints was pretty wide, and obviously, you know, I have to represent my party and what I stood for, but I was tried to be a representative to everybody, and you know, it was an honor. I think I actually had gotten a letter from somebody just recently that I responded to tonight before this meeting, where someone had asked me what I felt my accomplishment was, my best accomplishment in my 5 years in Springfield. And I felt like I had a reputation as somebody that even when I may have disagreed with somebody, I was reasonable, and that I was always somebody that even when we disagreed on issues, the other side could talk to me and we could have a conversation. And I felt like I had that reputation, and had a lot of friends across the spectrum. Even on, I'm you know, naturally I'm a farm boy. I'm pretty fairly conservative by nature, but I had some friends that were far to the left of me, and we never agreed on anything that we voted on. You know, our votes were diametrically opposed, but you know, they're friends that I'll have long after I left Springfield. So yeah, I think that pretty well sums it up, I guess.
Thank you very much. That was extremely interesting to hear, and so good to hear about how you worked across the aisle and have these friendships that won't be lifelong. But thank you, and thank you for your service. Senator Faraci, after 1 year.
Can you hear me? I hope.
Yes.
My system's being a little wonky. Oh, good. I'm actually using two systems, one for video and one for audio. Thank you all for allowing me to join. I am flattered and honored to be here. And sorry, honored to be in the presence of people like Representative Marron. I've known the representative for a very long time, and he's always been very kind to me. And times when I would see him at meetings, we had met a couple times, and he always remembered my name. I know I tell him that all the time. He always remembered my name and called me by name, and that really means a great deal to me, and I think it means a great deal to most people. So sort of a reflection on the first year. Wow, I mean, pretty busy would be one way to put it. Hectic, sometimes chaotic, but not more so than what I expected. The thing about this job, and when I took this job, it's about helping people. And what you learn, I think, more than anything is there's a great need, and there are a lot of people who need help. And I think probably the most frustrating thing is maybe that there aren't as many resources or enough resources that you would like there to be for people who have tremendous need. And so that's what our job is, and that's what we've been tasked to do, is to try and find help, trying to find resources for the people that live in our district and for the people of the state of Illinois as a whole. And so, although it's been, you know, I can't tell you how many times I'd heard the expression "drinking from a fire hose." Representative Schweisler, I'm sure you're feeling that and hearing that as well. But it's true, and it's exciting, but it can be exhausting at times too. But what we have to remember, and what I think, obviously I can't speak for Representative Marron, but what I believe we have to remember is we're here to help people. That's our job, and to do the best we can in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and much success in your tenure, Senator Faraci. It looks like we have a question from Teresa Michelson.
Good evening. This is the same question for both of you, obviously, but I'll let Senator Faraci start since he was the second respondent. So far, in your time, what are the barriers you have found to working across the aisle in Springfield? And as part of that, what do you think drives some people to try to overcome those barriers? I mean, if you've been so lucky as to be able to do that.
Thank you. Very good question. I think barriers, probably the biggest barrier is that our state is so different and so diverse. And so we have a tremendous number of differing opinions and probably needs throughout the state. And so that's probably the biggest barrier. You know, you hear a lot about partisanship and politics, but I feel like probably the best way to handle that is to get to know your colleagues and spend some time when there are free moments on the floor or even in the hallways, just to spend some time getting to know each other, get to know a little bit about the person, where they're from, what their interests are, what do they do when they're enjoying time with family. So it's a little more personal. And to me, that I feel like that's gone a long way. Of course, there are going to be times where we don't agree. And, you know, my dad always said, why can't we disagree without being disagreeable? And I feel like that's so critically important, especially these days. So, again, reiterating, I think getting to know your colleagues is probably, for me, has been the best thing to do. And the other thing is try not to take things too personally.
Representative Marron, what were the barriers you found in your 5 years in the House to working with people of the opposite party?
I would, first of all, I would agree with a lot of what the senator said. I mean, I think, you know, first and foremost, it is a very, very diverse state. You know, certainly somebody from far southern Illinois that grew up in a very rural area has got a very different life experience than maybe somebody that grew up on the south or west side of Chicago. And both of those individuals have a very different life experience from somebody that grew up in a very affluent suburb. So it's just a lot of diverse backgrounds and a lot of diverse opinions. And I think it is very critically important. It's even more important to try to get to know people on a personal level so that you can kind of cut through those differences. And, you know, I think all of us who are being reasonable when you can disagree with somebody, but as long as you know that their heart's in the right place, if you're being reasonable, you can have respect for that person. And so that's where those personal relationships really come in, is trying to get empathy with where they're coming from and learn a little bit about their life experience. And then also it's an opportunity to try to sell your viewpoint and why you believe the way you believe. And so, yeah, I think that's a big challenge. Being a Republican, I was never out of the super minority when I was there. I mean, our party was always the Democrats always had a veto-proof majority, and so that made it very challenging, just because there were so many things that the other party didn't really necessarily need us at the table for. So once again, it was going back to making those personal connections to try to get yourself at the table, to get your voice to be heard, and so that you could have a seat at the table. But it's from the practicality of trying to get legislation passed. It's always a matter of counting votes and how many votes you have to get to move a particular piece of legislation. And when the opposite party has all the numbers that they need without you, it makes it challenging when you're in the super minority to try to actually be at the table to work. Whereas, you know, maybe a more purple state where the majorities are always in flux from one party to the next, the parties just naturally have to work together. So it is a little more of a challenging environment in Springfield, especially from the viewpoint of somebody that was in the super minority.
Thanks. That's very, very interesting, very helpful. And I'm going to start with you because you have the 5 years experience. Do you have any examples of when bipartisanship was necessary to pass something or when bipartisanship successfully worked? Yeah.
Probably the biggest example I could cite that I was personally a part of, after the pandemic started slowing down and things started getting back to normal. So every time there's an economic slowdown, we have what we call the unemployment insurance trust fund, which basically employers pay into this fund, and then when they lay workers off, that fund is what's used to pay unemployment benefits to workers. But every time that the economy goes into recession, typically that fund goes negative because the need for unemployment benefits is so high. And so at that point in time, the federal government steps in and they make the state whole so that those unemployment benefits could be paid. But the pandemic was such a huge event where there was so many unemployment benefits paid out that we really got in a bad crunch, because the federal government will step in for a time that they put like a year deadline on it, and then the state has to get back to being whole. And so if not, the state is charged a significant amount of interest. And so always historically in the past, they had what a bipartisan working group where all four caucuses, the Republicans and Democrats in both houses, as well as business and labor leaders, got together in a room and they figured out either an increase in unemployment taxes or a cut to benefits or a combination of both to try to figure out how to pay that debt back to the federal government. Because I felt like I think this is what Leader Durkin at the time was thinking. I had a reputation of being able to work across the aisle and to be able to work with labor leaders, even though naturally I'm a little more pro-business. I got appointed to that task force, and we were actually able to come to an agreement with the help of the governor and solve that problem and make the state whole again. And that historically was the worst unemployment insurance trust fund deficit that we'd ever had in the history of our state. And so that was a time where there was a lot of arguing and fighting, and we had some meetings that we left in frustration, and we didn't want to talk to one another or see one another. But at the end of the day, we figured it out, and we made it work, and we put a bipartisan bill on the table, and we solved the problem that was historic in nature.
Wow, great story. Senator Faraci, have you had any instances where bipartisanship has been needed and has worked during this year?
Oh, absolutely. And, you'll see it in committee meetings, you'll see it on the floor. But I think it's really critically important to go back to that concept of we're hired by the people to help them. And homelessness and home insecurity, food deserts, people with disabilities and struggling in the margins, that's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's as bipartisan as it comes. Workforce development, economic development. These are things that are important, I believe, to everybody in the General Assembly. And making sure that when you walk in that door and you understand that is the foundation of why you're there, we all need each other to have those discussions. So we are, again, coming back to the critical important factor of helping people. And so there are times when we're just simply not going to see eye to eye on things. Okay. But the important things, I think there's more, we're more alike than we are different on those critical issues. And so that's what gives me hope. Again, I've known Representative Marron for years. I've seen what he's done. I've watched him work in the community, and he cares about the people in Vermillion and Champaign counties. And so that's what's important. And I think we can get past the other things. There are going to be times where we don't agree, but that foundation of we're here to help people who generally can't, specifically those who can't help themselves. And so that's our focus. And if we stay zoned in and keyed in on those issues, we're going to get the work done.
Okay, I think there's a question from Trisha Crawley. Trish, could you ask your question?
Sure. My question has to do with trying to get citizens to run for public office. It seems to be more and more difficult to find contested races and to have candidates willing to run. Why do you think that is so? And so we start with Senator Faraci.
Yeah, and I think that may be one of our greatest hurdles moving forward. We need good people to get involved. We need people to get involved for the right reasons. So, when I first started took this position, I told staff, I said, we're going to do the right things for the right reason. And I think that's what we need people to understand when they're considering this. Now, but the question that I want to answer is why aren't we seeing that? Why don't we have good people who are willing to run? I think, unfortunately, you've heard that 20-80 rule. So 20% of the people make 80% of the noise, maybe. So what we hear is a lot of the bad things. And this group, as well as Braver Angels, I think does a good job trying to cut through that noise and bring it back to what's important, helping people. And if we have more of those discussions and talking about more of the positive things, and of course, we're going to hear people who are fighting and are yelling about what someone else did, but we have to be able to cut through that noise, talk about the positive things, the positive relationships that we're building, and the positive things we can do for the people that we serve. That's critically important to get young people, middle-aged people, older people to get involved. Run for school board, run for city council, run for county board. We need you. And I think, I again don't want to speak for the other elected officials, but we need to bang that drum as much as possible and make it clear that yes, there are challenges in an elected office, and most of the time you hear the bad things, but the good things far outweigh the negatives, and we as a group and people that are engaged, we have to tell that story. We have to tell it, especially for I have a 17-year-old who's getting a little more involved, which I love, but especially for people of that age group. Yes, you're going to hear negative things, and you're going to see things on social media. You're going to see things on the news, but talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. There really is more we can do together and should do together in a positive way, and we have to spread that message number one and as a number one priority.
Okay, and Representative Marron, what can we do to encourage people to run for public office?
Well, I think, one of the challenges that we see as we have this deeper partisan divide in this country, the red areas are getting more red and the blue areas are getting more blue. And so some of the time you see these uncontested races because in the red counties, a Democrat can't get elected, and in a blue county, a Republican can't get elected. And so that's just a challenge that we're going to continue to deal with until we're able to bridge this partisan divide and get back to a more, I think, centrist model where people in the middle are I guess more prominent. In addition to that, I think one of the challenges that we face is that if politicians get a bad rap sometimes because there are some bad examples of people that have been involved in corruption and have gamed the system and gotten really rich off of their public office. But I'm here to tell you from personal experience that if you do public service the right way, the way you're supposed to do, this is not a get rich proposition. You're not if you're in politics and you intend to do it the right way and you're wanting to do it to make money, you're in the wrong line of work because you know, it's a lot of hours. It's spending Springfield, you know, renting an apartment in Springfield or staying in a motel over there 3 or 4 nights a week. It's, you know, going to 3 or 4 chicken dinners every Saturday. It's, you know, knocking on people's doors for 2, 3 hours a night, you know, before you come home. It's getting the door slammed in your face. It's, you know, there's a lot of stuff to it. You got to really, really want and be in love with public service and have a passion for doing it. And, you know, with the advent of social media and just the way we treat each other these days, the lack of civility in our society where people they don't hesitate to take shots. Sometimes they're very unfair. It's, you know, a person really has to ask themselves, you know, do I want to go through all of this? You know, you know, for a job that, you know, I could probably go to the private sector or stay in business and make, you know, more money, if not significantly more money. And so, I mean, there's really got to be a passion for it. So, I mean, I think anything that we can do to encourage younger people to get involved and try to, you know, kindle that fire for and that passion for public service, that's certainly important. But, you know, like Senator Faraci said, I think, you know, this group is indispensable at trying to play the role of bridging that gap and bringing some stability back to the system, because that's critically important. And I would be remiss if I because he said so many nice things about me. I will say that I was blessed during my time in Springfield to be able to serve both with Senator Faraci and his predecessor, Senator Bennett. And, you know, I would consider both of them really good friends, you know, beyond uh, beyond my career in politics. You know, there's somebody that the senator is somebody I greatly respect and somebody I would consider a friend. And you know, that helps when you have somebody that represents the same area that you do, that even when you don't agree with him on something, you know, you can go have a conversation. And so, yeah, we need to encourage more Paul Faraci's to be involved in public service. That would help a lot.
Okay, thank you both.
I'm going to record that, Representative Marron. Use that one later.
Trish, I saw you had 2 questions in the chat. Did you get both of them answered?
Can I chime in real quick on that one?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of, you know, what the senator and representative, I'll still call you Representative Marron, what they had said. If you kind of, you know, my background is I retired out of the Marine Corps last year, and if you kind of view how, you know, public service these days was, and how the military is viewed, you know, back in the Vietnam time frame, you know, coming out of Vietnam, like the military was viewed very poorly. Well, these days, you know, politicians are viewed very poorly. If there's only 2 people you can never trust, that'd be a politician and a used car salesman. And so I believe it's going to start with the way that we raise our children. And I personally view that, you know, in the next couple of years, you know, when the individuals that are in high school now, with as much divisiveness and, you know, arguing that they're seeing on the news, you know, Republicans hate Democrats, Democrats hate Republicans. 90% of us want to be right in that middle line. We have views that are different, yes, but we just want what's best for our individuals. Unfortunately, that those that are, you know, like Senator Faraci, Representative Marron, and myself, who aren't very loudly spoken and don't view the others in a negative light, we're not going to be the ones that get put on the news. It's those loudest squeaky wheel is the one that gets the grease. So those individuals, when they're talking bad, that's what's going to get the news itself. So it's going to be, you know, us talking to the younger generation and letting them know that, you know, this isn't how politics is supposed to be. It's supposed to be fighting for the people and what's best for them. It's not supposed to be fighting, you know, that person that's across the aisle just because I don't like, you know, what letter comes after their name.
Thank you.
And Carol, I think, yeah, my second question about why there are so many uncontested races, I think was answered
Okay.
in that.
And Joan Towsey, I see you have a question in chat.
Right, well, I think we've spoken a bit right now about the importance of the younger generation. So my questions before this came up had to do with generational differences in the desire of your colleagues to be bipartisan, and also based on, I guess, again, the generational differences, if constituents at different age groups are contacting you in different ways. And is that going in the right direction? And delighted to hear that Senator Faraci's child is teenager is getting involved. But also, we should put in a plug for the student ambassador program within the League of Women Voters. So maybe someone in the Faraci family could join to participate in that way. Well, that was a dead question.
Okay, could you kind of crisply say what the question was?
Do you see generational differences in how constituents are dealing with you, or your colleagues are dealing with you? Okay.
Representative.
I'm in Florida, so maybe it's not getting through well or something.
Well, I mean, I think, to me, I think it's always more difficult, at least that's been my experience, to engage the younger voters, the younger citizens. You know, why is that? I don't know. I mean, I do think, you know, certainly, and this goes back to the bipartisan question and the partisan divide and how that was created. I mean, I think one thing that we've always benefited from, at least in my lifetime, they're almost gone now, but I think, you know, the World War II generation, and my grandfather was a World War II vet, and you know, I think the people of that age, they went through so many life-changing events with the Depression and then World War II. They were really events that really coalesced the country, right? Everybody came together. And so I think, you know, my grandpa was a diehard Republican. He's one of the reasons why I was a Republican. But, you know, I think he was always an American first. And I think that's some of what we see. And a lot of the generational involvement as we've lost those older generations, and we've become more affluent as a society, that civic engagement has, for whatever reason, it's lost its level of priority that it should have. And then we've also lost that level of civility because, you know, I mean, we've had some traumatic events. I don't want to, you know, make light. You know, certainly 9/11 was a horrible event, and it was also a very unifying event. But you know, those people that really experienced that, those huge events of the Depression and World War II are now pretty well gone. And I think that's something that we struggle with, both on the civility side and the fact that, you know, it's just harder and harder because public service engagement, being a part of, you know, Rotary or the Lions Club or Kiwanis or volunteering at the church or whatever, it's just become less and less of a priority. And so it makes it challenging. I mean, that's part of it. On the not so negative side, because I know that sounds kind of negative, but one thing I think I never did a very good job of, and I need to figure out how to do a better job of, but it's difficult, is I think, you know, younger generations communicate different than I do. Than all of us do, right? They're using social media and many of us are probably on social media, but the younger generations are probably on a different social media platform. And so part of it is, I think I'm largely out of touch with how to connect with younger people. And that's, I mean, part of it is because, you know, I was at an event today that Representative Schweizer was at with me, where we were talking to high school kids, and, you know, I'm 30 years older than these kids. And so, you know, I just don't communicate the way they do. And then part of it is that technology moves so fast that we're so rapidly changing the way we communicate. It just makes it challenging to actually engage those younger voters and those younger citizens. So it's something that I probably didn't do a good enough job of when I was in office.
Yeah, I think Representative Marron really hit the major points, that the generationally, if parents aren't engaged, it's much more challenging to get the children engaged in the process, and we've seen that decline. And you know, apathy in any space is dangerous. But certainly incredibly dangerous when it comes to apathy towards civic engagement. And so it is scary. And I, unfortunately, I missed the event that the representatives were at today, although I was there last year. But it brings up a really good point, and that is for representatives or senators or city council or mayor or people that volunteer for Make-A-Wish, Crisis Nursery, or whatever your choice is in volunteering, is to take the opportunity to go to the schools when you can and talk to the kids. And I've done that a couple times at some of the Danville High School, some of the Champaign middle schools. So taking that opportunity, when possible, to get into the classrooms, to talk to the kids about what you do, regardless of what it is. Any civic engagement that you're involved in is really important, because we really are seeing a decline, I think, from the parents who have a lot of them have checked out from the system, because it has gotten more challenging to see the enjoyment in it. So we have to be able to be as engaged with, you know, I say young people, but with young people as we possibly can, and take the opportunity when available to insert ourselves in those daily events to talk about the importance of being involved in community.
Thank you. I think you both answered that very well. And, you know, we struggle as well in the League of Women Voters with trying to get a younger demographic to join us in this mission. So it's an issue. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Ann Panthen, I believe you have a question.
I do have a question. So Representative Marron, how difficult is it to break with your party on a vote? Or how difficult was it, I guess, in your case? And then is abstention an opportunity to sort of get around that?
So repeat the second part of the question.
Is abstention an opportunity? I mean, is that used to sort of get around breaking with the party?
Well, the first part of the question, I would say that it all really depends on the vote, right? So there's literally hundreds of pieces of legislation that move through in any given session, and so occasionally you'll break with the party on a minor vote of, you know, for instance, I think there was there was a very small criminal justice reform measure that allowed judges more leeway in offering lighter sentences for offenders. And my party pretty well voted in mass against it. But I had a reason from talking with some of the judges in the county, Vermillion County, to support that. But it was a very small reform. It didn't get any attention. So most people didn't even notice that I broke with the party. Then there's the other on the major issues, things like the tax increase, for instance. I happened to vote for the Capitol bill as a freshman, and so that was tough. I mean, that was real tough, and I got some heat for it, certainly from, you know, the right wing of the party. They were not happy with me at all. I wasn't the only Republican that broke with the party line on that vote, but yeah, you know, in a case like that, it's tough. And you know, I got beat up pretty good for it in a couple subsequent election cycles. So yeah, it's difficult. You know, but it's something that you've got to do. So yeah. So and I beg your pardon. The second part of the question, I mean, I didn't really get the gist of it. Explain what you meant by that. If you...
Well, I guess what the point of it is if you abstain from a vote, is that preferable to voting not with your party? Or is that something that you do? I guess I don't really understand abstention all that well.
I understand your question now, and I apologize. I mean, voting in abstention, I mean, or not voting, you know, voting absent can be, I mean, it can be a tool that you use, I guess. I don't like to do that. I never like to do that. You know, I felt like I should take a stand. There were a couple times I didn't vote on something because I thought there were, you know, sometimes issues come up that are just blatantly politically motivated, or at least that was my thought, right? And it was a vote that was set up to put you in a trap. So yeah, on times like that, I didn't necessarily, which, you know, people don't want to believe that, but political games like that happen in Springfield, which is just part of the process. But when something like that happened, I didn't feel as bad about voting present or not voting. But you know, I don't know. It just depends on the circumstance. I mean, sometimes if you wouldn't vote on something, and you're going against your party, you know, you may draw the ire of people in the party because they feel like you're taking the easy way out, or you're being a coward. You know, you could certainly be accused of that. But the thing is, I mean, it's always easier to explain an absent vote in an election process, right? I mean, you're never really going to get beat up by voting present or not voting when you're going through an election. But that doesn't necessarily mean that your colleagues and the rest of the members of your caucus are going to view that favorably, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is, like, ideally, we shouldn't be making decisions on how we're voting based on how it's going to affect us in the upcoming election anyways, right? We should be doing what's right because it's the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in. So that the House and the Senate might be a little bit different. The Senate, we have fewer people. And because the Democrats have that supermajority, there's a lot of breaking from the party. A lot of bills pass. I don't want to say a lot, but bills tend to pass with sometimes very fewer votes than needed. That happens a lot more often. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So the Democrats can pass a bill with a smaller majority of their caucus voting, and the others can vote no on it, and it can still pass. So the dynamic is a little different, especially in the Senate, where there's half the numbers that there is in the House. And so in the House, I can't speak for that, but you'll see a lot of bills that just narrowly pass, which means it happens. I think it probably happens more often than you might think. I think in voting, abstaining or voting present, yeah, I think I would agree with the representative. You know, that's you don't want to use that as a tool regularly. If something seems overtly political, you may do that. But again, that's not why we're not sent there, obviously, to vote present or to abstain. So yeah, I would I would recommend using that sparingly. But it brings up an interesting point, and I hope it's okay if I bring this up, because I think it's interesting. And it's something that happened to me in my real life experience. So in 2000, I was elected to the county board, which is caucus-like politics, right? So there's a Democrat caucus and a Republican caucus when I was on Champaign County Board, still is. And then when I got elected to city council, it's in Champaign, it's nonpartisan. The dynamics are very different on how things get done when you're caucus-driven politics, like in county board or at the state senate or state house, where it was very different at city council. There are fewer people, obviously, on city council, but it really is more about the issue, because it's not caucus driven. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yep.
But for me, I was pretty young when I got elected to county board. I think it was young now, but I was 20, I don't remember, 29, 28, 29, 30. And it was a surprise of how contentious it could be because of the caucus. And then when I got elected to city council, it really was kind of refreshing. And so I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to get involved and get elected to something and do it, and you don't like the politics part of it, maybe focus on nonpartisan elections like Champaign City Council. I don't know, not all city councils are that way, but I really much more enjoyed being on the city council for that reason. Probably told you way more than I should have, and I'm probably going to get in trouble from somebody. But that's the truth, and that was my experience, and I really did enjoy city council. I'm not going to say more than something else, but I really did enjoy it.
Okay. Ann Prislin, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Actually, Senator Faraci, I think your comment about different approaches taken in different sorts of governing setups does matter. And that's really the intent of my question is, are there specific changes that either you or Representative Marron would see to our whole election system or our elected official system that would help create more bipartisanship? For example, some states have one primary ballot and candidates from all parties are on that ballot. So the voter can choose. It doesn't have to be a choice driven by party. What about ending party primaries and having all candidates on one primary ballot? Or what about going to a system of ranked choice voting, which allows for more opportunity for voters to speak their minds, and research seems to indicate tends to lead to the election of more moderate or centrist candidates. So I'm wondering what you're both feeling about those kinds of changes, or perhaps others that you would like to see. So Representative Marron, maybe I could start with you.
So I think the first change that I would propose that I think would help the most is redistricting reform. And it's easy for me as a Republican to sit here in Illinois and say, oh, the Democrats gerrymander these districts and it's not fair the way it's done. And certainly, if I was still running for election, I'd be screaming that from the rooftops and saying these districts aren't fair. But the truth of the matter is, the honesty of it is that if you live in Indiana, where the Republicans control everything, the Republicans are doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so, in a red state, Republicans gerrymander the districts to be in their favor. In blue states, Democrats gerrymander the districts to be in their favor. And so I think on a national level, there probably needs to be some sort of redistricting, fair map reform to draw more competitive districts, because I think that more than in many of these legislative districts, the battle is fought and won in the primary, and that is what is really contributing, in my opinion, contributing a lot to this issue of the partisan divide, because in a Republican primary, you have to run further to the right. In a Democrat Party primary, you have to run further to the left. You know, I would be open to having something like, you know, doing away with the partisan primary ballot. I think my one concern with that would be in a really blue state or a really red state. Are you putting? Do you run in the danger of having either two Republicans or two Democrats on the ballot? But I do see where it would cause the other party to moderate. And I think there's definitely some value in that. The other thing I would say about that is I think it's insane, and I think it contributes to this problem that a very, very small minority of the voting public are picking our candidates. And I won't mention any names, but certainly in some very high profile races that affect all of us, not only in this state, but in other states, that is starting to heat up right now. I think our choices are very limited because a very small number of voters are picking our candidates that, quite frankly, are going to be running the country. So I hope I said that in a somewhat veiled way that everybody understood. Maybe with my displeasure on who may be running the country in the next 4 years. But yeah, I certainly, I think there's some value in entertaining ideas like that.
Thank you very much. Senator Faraci?
Sorry, I had to come off mute. Yeah, I think your question is a very good one and a very valid one. I think we desperately need to consider alternatives and how we do this. I have heard internally some discussions through our party at the Senate level anyway, of at least having an open mind about what that would look like, what the pros and the cons are, because I think anytime you have that kind of dramatic change, first of all, it's not going to happen overnight, and I think it's going to be pretty heated, to say the least. But I'm starting to see conversations now that 5 years ago I don't think would have even been on the table. So do I have an answer? No, I don't. But I would agree that we've got to start looking at better ways to conduct our elections, and I'm hopeful that we can have some critical thinking around the idea of improving how things are done. And if you haven't figured it out, I'm pretty optimistic about things, and so I believe there's room for that discussion, and I believe that we're starting to see some traction in that space.
Thank you both for your broad-minded answers to my questions. I really appreciate it.
Sarah Kelly, I see you have a question.
This is more of a comment than a question, but I recall in last June in Rantoul at the Braver Angels event that Mike, you commented that how frustrating it was on social media when you would put something, comment about something that was a bipartisanship effort that you had been involved with, that on social media you would just get a couple of likes. But if you did something that was in opposition or critical of the other party, you got a gazillion likes. And that comment really stuck in my mind. And because I was trying to think of what can citizens do to encourage bipartisanship. And I think that's a really concrete example of when somebody from the other party that maybe we didn't vote for does something that's good for everybody. We need to really support that. And it doesn't matter what party they represent. So anyway, that's just something I just wanted to say. And I think, Paul, you were at the event, and I think you were nodding in agreement with that comment, that happens a lot. So anyway, just a lesson for all of us who are on social media.
Yeah. If I can, I think I don't want to interrupt Representative Marron if he was about to say something, and I think it was directed to him. But the social media really does concern me because there's this anonymity, anonymous ability to attack somebody with no consequence. And I know I've got I have a political page. I don't even know where it is or what it is, but it's a Facebook page, and people say very nasty things about me or about the party with little to no remorse, it seems like, and certainly no consequence. And that's scary to me because I think we're and it's not, I mean, it's not just for people that are in politics. We hear about bullying for kids in grade school. So it happens all over the spectrum. But anyway, that's troubling, and that's part of the reason we're struggling to find good people who want to be a part of this, is because it's too easy to attack with little to no consequence. Sorry, I probably got off the topic there.
I would just like to say I appreciate your comments, and I mean, I don't know how we fix this. It's a societal issue that's way bigger than any of us, but I mean, we've got to quit rewarding people for bad behavior is what it amounts to. And I certainly appreciate your comment, your ideas about, maybe when we see somebody on the other side that we don't necessarily agree with, but when they've done something that you like, definitely, I think in a small way, we've got to start trying to set that good example. But yeah, like in my case, I mean, I got the most likes, the most social media traffic I got was when I was very critical of the governor. And in my case, it was something where I honestly wasn't trying to be unreasonable or get attention. It was a very difficult circumstance involving COVID. And I had not had much luck getting resolution to some issues that were affecting the people that I represented. And I lost my temper. And I mean, part of it is people could see that I was genuinely upset, and so I think that is in a weird way positive, that people really, I mean, they saw that I really cared, and so that was part of it. But what's different in my case that I've seen from some of my colleagues, and not everybody in Springfield's like this, but there are certain members on both sides of the aisle. Certainly, there's plenty of Republicans that are guilty of this, that they stand up and they say audacious things because they know it's going to get them attention. That's all they're doing it for. And they know they're going to get rewarded with a newspaper story, or, a story on the news, or they're going to get 1,000 Facebook likes. And we've just got to do whatever we can do to stop rewarding people for bad behavior. This is what it amounts to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you very much. It's close to 8. I do want to, Senator Faraci, Representative Marron, do you want to say anything short in closing, since the basketball game is about to start and I promised people, any closing comments?
I'll be very quick. I just want to thank you and thank your group, the league, for doing this. Again, critically important. And everyone that joined tonight, thank you for engaging. We look forward to more positive discussions in the future. Thank you, everybody.
I would just second that. Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. And, it was truly an honor to serve the 104th district and to represent all of you. And it was an honor to serve with my good friend, Senator Faraci, and I think Representative Schweizer is going to do a good job. He's a nice guy, and I think that definitely is going to carry on the spirit of bipartisanship. So thanks for having me here tonight.
Thank you both for coming. This has been a great conversation, and thank you for giving us the time. Representative Schweitzer, also thank you for coming. I know you're just getting started, and I know your days are very busy. It's very, very thoughtful, and we appreciate you being present for an hour. I thank Ann Panthan for being the Zoom operator, and the program team for helping put on this program. Our next Keeping It Local program, just a little plug here, that you might be interested in. If you're like I am and you take out the recycling on Monday morning and you wonder, did I do it right? You might find the March program interesting. The topic is the facts and the myths of recycling. And we're very lucky to have the local leaders of our recycling efforts from the city of Champaign, the city of Urbana, and from campus be our guest speakers. So I think you'll have, we'll come away with some good takeaways for that, keeping it local. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for participating. And now let's go cheer the Illini on.
Great job, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.